Sitting down all day long studying all this stuff. So I need to stand up. Get some circulation back in my legs.
I've also been sitting all day, but sign me up for more sitting, baby. I'm here for it. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah,
The previous one was. We ready?
Recording in progress.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Trinidad Planning Commission for February 21st, 2024. Bear in mind that this meeting is a hybrid meeting. It is held in person and also via video conference hosted on the Zoom platform. So anyone who signs into Zoom, we will try to make sure that if you have any comments or questions, just please raise your hand and we'll try to get to you as quickly as we can. First item on our agenda this evening is the roll call.
Commissioner Slade?
I'm here.
Commissioner Cole?
Present.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
And Commissioner Hopkins and Commissioner Hakinen are absent.
So let me just note that as since we only have three commissioners here this evening, we just verified what the process is for decision making, and we only need a majority of the quorum for any decision this evening. That means that 2-to-1 could either approve or 2-to-1 could disapprove anything that we have to vote on. So I just wanted to confirm that so everyone understood the rules for this meeting's session. Okay, the next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. We have one set of minutes for approval from January 17th. Any questions, comments, clarifications from the commissioners? I had just one real simple typo, Trevor, which is on page 1 of the minutes. Under public hearing, the item 1, Morrison, the last sentence there, I think is just a cut and paste issue. Trinidad 2023-03, update the property, temporary closure of AMLT. It's covered elsewhere.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments? Any comments, questions, clarifications from the public? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is approval of the agenda. We have 2 items for public hearing, discussion, decision, and action. The first one is update of temporary closure of AMLT.
Richard, do we need a vote on approval of the minutes?
Excuse me. Thank you very much. I'm out of practice.
I move to approve the minutes as amended. Second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all say aye. Minutes are approved. Thank you very much for the help me out, guys. All needed. Yes. Okay. Next item, as I said, was approval of the agenda. We have actually 3 items, excuse me, for public hearing tonight. Trinidad AMLT closure, EWAL design review, permit, use permit, and coastal development permit for new construction, and then a review regarding the draft ADU ordinance. Changes to the agenda? If none, do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Discussed a lot of issues.
Moving second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that is approved. Next item on our agenda is items from the floor. This is an opportunity for anyone in the public, both on Zoom and here in person, to make comments to the commissioners on any issue that is not on the agenda this evening. We request that your comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. Do I hear any comment? Someone on Zoom?
Thank you so much. We will have the floor.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move on then to the next item, which is our agenda items. First agenda item is update on the temporary closure of the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail and progress to date to reopen the trail. Trevor?
So this is just my monthly update on the temporary closure of the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail, which was approved as emergency action last year due to erosion at the base of the bluff there. The Parker Creek Trail, there were some repairs accomplished and that was reopened. The Axel Lindgren Trail remains closed. We presented at the last meeting repair plan for short-term light touch repairs to get the trail open. The city's goal is to have that open still by Memorial Weekend. The trail, it does soil disturbance in that area requires approval of a variety of different groups. The city has requested a meeting with the trail management team. As of the time of writing the staff report, we hadn't heard back from the Ancestral Society, but we had heard back from the and the Coastal Conservancy. But we did hear from them today, so they will try and make that meeting date, which will be next week, I believe. So hopefully we can discuss, and maybe we'll hear about their report for rerouting the trail. Regardless, that temporary closure is going to expire for both Van Wyck and Axel Lindgren trails in March. So you will be seeing both of those March. Likely staff will be requesting additional temporary closure time on both of those. Hopefully we'll have some more progress to report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from commissioners?
Yeah, you said that, or here it looks like you met with the Coastal Commission earlier this week to discuss.
Actually, yeah, we met with Coastal Commission yesterday, primarily to talk about the Van Wyck Trail, because that was Coastal Commission itself had, told the city that they want to see that open in 6 months. So we've been meeting regularly with them. They had an interesting update. It sounds like they've kind of taken this issue up the chain with their staff, and because of they met with the Ancestral Society a few months ago, and there's also been correspondence from the York tribe requesting that trail be closed because of cultural reasons. So seems like Coastal Commission staff may be favor of closure at this point.
Which trail are you referring to?
Van Wyck. Axel Lindgren is more complicated. I think everybody wants that open. It's part of settlement agreements. It's a historic cultural trail. So that one, I don't think anybody has any desires to have that close long term. But Van Wyck is probably the direction we're going, and with improvements to Edward Street.
Further comments?
So the short-term fixes for the Axel Lindgren Trail, Is there any chance those would come before the planning commission before they get sort of approved by the management team, or it has to go through the management team before it comes?
No, I think it was basically the same. What I sent them was the same thing that you guys saw last month. So just sort of an outline of what needs to occur. That's what we sent them as a starting point for discussion.
Yeah, I guess, right. But in terms of like an actual project that we might decide on, so that we need to go through the.
If, there's not necessarily one has to come before the other. We do have to have the ancestral system. I think it's the Rancheria, it's the lineal descendants of Triai and the State Historic Preservation Officer. I think they're the approvals that we need for any soil disturbance down there on that trail. So we do need those approvals. Now we could potentially condition a planning commission action on getting those approvals. Ideally, we would have the management team, at least a consent, agree, at least a tentative agreement on that before we would.
I just wanted to, if indeed it was the remedies that were presented at our last meeting that got passed along, I wanted to reiterate looking for some sort of creative solution at the toe of the roof, right? Some sort of standalone metal staircase or something that would in fact minimize soil disturbances, whether that's an avenue around policy 69 or not. I think it's something worth investigating. Honestly, I think it's interesting.
Further comments? I'll just ask for one clarification, Trevor. On page 1 of the report under update, you say the city has sent a request to the Churai management team. I completely understand that. Then the last sentence of that paragraph says the TAS have not responded to the request thus far. It's not clear to me, was that supposed to be the management team or actually TAS?
The TAS. So we have heard from, we had heard from the Conservancy and the Yurok tribe first, but not the TAS.
Thank you.
But now we have, and so I think we're going to move forward.
I mean, it was tremendously helpful to have some legal counsel present at the previous discussion. Do you think it would be worth inviting TAS counsel, maybe the city, to also this discussion to make sure we're not running afoul of any legal complexities as we discuss possible solutions and things included?
Yeah, and definitely any proposal, any action we brought to you would certainly go through at least the city attorney. But yeah.
I don't want to run afoul of anything or
No comments, questions? Any comments or questions from the public on this agenda item, closure of the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail? Hearing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item. Agenda item number 2, Ewald 2023-01. Is that correct? Yes, it is, isn't it? Design review, grading permit, use permit, and a coastal development permit to construct a new 2-story, 3-bedroom, 3,229 square foot residence. Trevor?
Yeah, so I'll just quickly go through some of the highlights in my staff report. I won't necessarily touch on everything, but I'm certainly able to answer questions, and the applicant and the applicants also here to provide some additional information. So this project is located off Langford Road. I haven't heard back from the assessor on whether they can provide any insight into that. I'm going to call it Langford for now. So sort of between Langford and Scenic Drive, it's sort of wedged in between there. The property was part of the subdivision back in 2007. So there are a variety of studies and reports that were prepared for the subdivision that informed the placement and design of the house. Those have been followed. Some of the reports have been updated. The geologist, one of the geologists who worked on it went out to the site and provided an update. A botanist went out there, looked at habitat. So there's a variety of background reports and information regarding the site. It's kind of, the approvals are a little bit complicated. It's really just a new house, but it's a big lot. It's a big house, a long driveway. And some tree removals involved. So the use permit's required as part of the tree for removal of trees over 12 inches. Grading permit because of the amount of soil disturbance and area being disturbed. The design review for the house and the development permit, which those. The sent out referrals for this project. Comments back were the health department did approve the OWTS for this, so that's good. The engineer had some comments and questions about the drainage and erosion control. The applicant did prepare a drainage plan that's included in the packet. And that was in consultation with the city engineer's office. So we isn't signed off on that yet, but that's been included as a condition of approval that will need to be city engineer approval on that prior to construction. And then the TIPO from the Trinidad Rancheria commented that this is in their area of concern and so requested the cultural monitor be on site during soil disturbing activities. So that has also been included as a condition of approval. The site is zoned suburban residential, which is a sort of a rural residential zone, so low density single family housing. Is the primary use there. The project does meet all the height and setback and parking and all those kind of standard zoning requirements. You can see here the house is fairly large, but it's 3% floor to area ratio, so sometimes the 10%. On the SR zone properties. Let's see, grading. So it's not in the MS4 stormwater area, so it didn't have to include, we didn't have to go through the stormwater process steps, which was disappointing because this would have actually been the first project that would have been subject to those because of its size. But they are including some drainage swales anyway, so those are kind of the requirements of that ordinance anyway. The driveway is fairly long, but it's basically existing, in the existing contours of the site. R1 geologic report was prepared for the subdivision. All those recommendations are included as a conditions of approval for this project. The geologist came out, looked at the site and plans and said everything was consistent and the conditions haven't changed on the site. This is in a earthquake fault hazard area, so there was a fault study done as part of the subdivision, and the house is within that building site that was identified. The steep slope above Scenic Drive on the south side of the property is mapped as being questionably stable. And so the geologist also looked at that. There will be some trees removed there, but the stumps will be left in place, and some native landscaping, native plants will be planted there to screen the site and stabilize the soil. And the report found that the project would not be subject to instability or causes. The septic design has been, the leach field has been designed to include a future ADU. That approval is not, you're not approving that tonight, the future ADU, but the leach field has been sized to accommodate an ADU in the future. An ADU would require a new tank, its own tank. But the septic system's been approved. The botanist found that there was no environmentally sensitive habitat areas on the site. So that's not an issue in terms of setbacks. The applicant is proposing to remove 19 trees for a variety of reasons. Solar access, views, remove some trees. So those are covered in the application. There will be some additional plantings, as I mentioned, on the slope to help screen the site. There were some comments from Coastal Commission staff and responses from the applicant, and those, I think those have been adequately covered. And then the rest of the staff report are the use permit findings. That's only related to the tree removal, and then the design review for the structure. As usual, those findings have been written in a manner to allow approval. But if you feel differently or the public submits information that conflicts with those findings, they should be reworded accordingly. Staff recommendation is for approval. There's a sample motion for approval in there, but you do have alternatives to add conditions to address other concerns, or continue the project to obtain information, or deny the project if we feel that the findings one or more can't be made. Most of the conditions of approval are fairly standard. There's one more specific to the grading ordinance and the city engineers sign off and approval. There's all recommendations from the LACO report. There is a permit required from the county, so part of the property is in the county's jurisdiction, so they have applied for the encroachment permit for the end of the driveway on the road. And then there's number 10 is for the cultural monitor. And then I added a couple to the driveway to protect the leach field, so a curb or bollards to keep someone from driving off the driveway and onto the leach field, and to make sure drainage is okay. That is my report, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Okay, this is a little bit more complicated than just a simple reconstruction of a piece of property that we've seen before. So I was trying to figure out how we could break it down and maybe figure out the best way to get clarification on this. Maybe I would suggest that first thing we do is perhaps if we have any clarifications in the staff report itself, just that we go through that, if that's okay with you. And then it probably is ideal to have the agent and the property owner to maybe brief us, and we'll be somewhat flexible in the amount of time that we give them, because this is a little bit more complicated than what we normally see. And then, of course, the public will have an opportunity to comment, and then we'll go back and forth a couple of times, I'm sure. So if that's acceptable, then we'll proceed that way. Okay. So the first item is if you have any questions for Trevor on the staff report per se.
I have 8 questions for Trevor. And so I'm happy to go first or go last or take turns or whatever. And Commissioner Johnson, Chair Johnson, as you said, this is a pretty complex application, and I just hope that the sheer number of questions I've got, both for Trevor / applicant's agents, aren't interpreted as, that, but rather just indicative of my own naivete. So I just want to preface all of this with that. So the first question I've got for you, Trevor, is in your staff report, it describes that there might be this ADU that may be formally proposed in the future, but some of the supplemental materials make it clear that is definitely a plan of the letter from Mr. Ewald justifying removal of plants, and it mentions, that project will be proposed in a future application, which conveys some sense of certainty to me. So my question is, are there any risks or pitfalls of separating these two projects? considering them separately? I mean, the building envelopes are sufficient that we can.
No, yeah, I think, and that was part of the purpose of showing it on the site plan to show that there is the space available within that buildable portion. Where it's proposed, it wouldn't require additional tree removal. And again, the leach field has been sized to accommodate it. So, and they'd have to come back for approval in the future. So, I guess it would be their own problem if there were.
Yeah, I think that's we would either hamstring ourselves or they would be hamstrung.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask that question right off the bat. All right, on to question number 2. So I got a copy of the soils reports from Lindbergh Geologic Consulting and the more recent updates. In the more recent updates, Mr. Lindbergh writes, this letter will also address the concerns relevant to the soils report that were raised by the planner for the city of Trinidad. And so I want to ask, do you recall those concerns that he's referencing? And are there any that don't appear in the staff reports?
I think he misunderstood, and that was the Coastal Commission's letter that he was actually.
But we have all of those concerns in front of us, nevertheless.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. And I assure you, I mean no offense by this, because this is in no way meant to question Mr. Ewald's qualifications, because I Googled him and it seems that yes, he does in fact know a thing or two about forestry. But are there ethical or legal implications of allowing any applicant, not just Mr. Ewald, to use their credentials to make assertions on their own applications? Is there a history of the Planning Commission?
No, I think, applicants who have those professional expertise and licenses should be able to save some money and do the work themselves, I think. It's not an issue we run across in Trinidad a lot, but, so for the Davies project, they didn't hire an architect, they did their own drawing. It's not exactly the same thing, but we had to trust that their site plan was what they were representing it to be. So, it's his license and qualifications putting it on the line, in a sense. So, regardless of the professional, and we don't have any reason to not.
Yeah, like I said, I have no reason to doubt any of this qualification. Sure, I was just curious about ethical and legal implications.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's all we need to decide. Do have a license in good standing as a professional course. There is an allegation of some sort of malfeasance on my part. The licensing action with the licensing board actually would review such an allegation.
Regardless of whether that was
from that license in jeopardy for me, of course, it's zeros. But no, there are consequences, and there's a board that takes these things seriously.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I would point out too that we've had general contractors come to the planning committee projects of their own.
Sorry, again, this is, I think, my 12th or 13th meeting. I just wanted to say that because I don't have a whole lot of experience here, seek some clarification there. All right.
Good question. Yeah.
Thank you. On to question number 4, halfway through. On packet page 21 of the staff reports, you quote one of the geological reports. It is our professional opinion that the proposed new residence, septic systems, including reserve fields, and driveways as proposed on the site appear to be suitably and sufficiently set back from the potentially unstable lands to ensure site stability. And continuing, it is our opinion that the proposed site developments can be constructed as proposed without being subject to or exacerbating existing soils and or geologic hazards associated with the project location. So it's from the engineer. Okay.
The engineer.
Sorry, the geologist. Yes, sorry. Both meaning. So they explicitly mention a lot of things, but do not explicitly mention tree removal. And so I'm wondering, just to clarify, is tree removal development in this context, or is it omitted from that list purposefully?
I assumed that, he reviewed the plans and the plans include the tree removal. So I assume that when he says development, it's included in, but maybe the applicant has some additional information.
I have a request here. Could both of you speak into the microphone?
Sure. The difference? So I guess I'm asking this because there's one specific sentence in the staff report which is that the geologist found that there was no impacts to slope stability from tree removal. And I had a look through the geological reports that you sent me, and I didn't see any mention specifically of tree removal, which makes me question whether they're including that in development or not. And I think naturally I'm a bit skeptical of that claim that removal of trees doesn't affect slope stability. You and I will talk about that because I know nothing about forestry and certainly do. So I was just curious which geologist made that statement and in which report.
Yeah, I made the assumption that when he reviewed the development, he was including the tree removals and stuff.
Generally development in this context. Sorry,
It would be part of the project, yeah. So again, he would have reviewed these plans that you're seeing, which included tree removal.
So I could clarify, at least in the discussion I had with him on site.
sure.
So I went through the draft plans that you prepared for us, including all the site work, and showed him.
Neil, excuse me, again, if you wouldn't mind coming to the
Oh,
microphone,
I'm sorry.
because we record this and we want to make sure that everybody can hear. Okay.
Yes, okay. In response to the question of did the geologist have any chance to review, I showed him the plans, which include the draft report, essentially the same that you've seen there in terms of the size and scope of the project, which included tree removal. And so he was aware of that when he was outside. I let him do what he had to do, and I paid him 50. So I didn't try to influence him. So we looked at
A related question. Okay, but the references to slope stability, do they refer specifically to that sort of southernmost margin of the property, or does that include like the entire slope from 180?
The entire slope. So the way it's mapped, the mapping that was done in 1976 isn't super accurate. And so looking at it though, it appears like the intent was to follow that break in slope above Scenic Drive. So it's the entire slope. Much of it is unstable. The upper parts are mapped as being questionably stable, and it extends up to that break in slope above Scenic Drive.
Again, this is not a guide. My own naivete. The most recent update from the geologist was dated in January, as I recall. Us are stamped 5th. Again, not to trust anybody. But are there procedural or legal issues with the site plan that did?
So the changes were primarily related to I think totally related to the addition of the visual assessment and the drainage plan. And then Julia, the architect, sent an entire new set to me, just put together with the new date on it. I didn't see any other
Yeah,
changes.
would have been my assumption, but I just wanted to clarification there. Two more questions, which I think are easier to answer. What do we do with the comments from the Coastal Commission? Like, what's our?
Yeah, they were recommendations. The project, most of the project area, at least where the building site is in the area that's appealable to the Coastal Commission. So if they decide they're not satisfied, they could appeal the project. Their letter included recommendations. It doesn't compel the city necessarily to do anything. And I think the applicant did adequately address those comments. And I did send them the updated information, and I haven't heard anything.
Thank you. This is my take. What is a forest or timberland conversion permit?
I do not know. That is that would be CAL FIRE as a different
Then
agency.
strike the first part of the question.
Okay.
I don't have any questions specific to the staff report. I do have some questions regarding the conditions, but I don't think quite used to the conditions, so maybe I'll save those for later.
Okay, I guess, again, I'm probably in the same boat. I think I'd like to hear from the property owner and the agent. Probably will answer a lot of the questions that we have, or at least clarify some of the issues. But I did have a couple of things, Trevor, that I wanted to understand. This is the first time I've heard of a rancheria area of concern.
Me too.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, I'd like to get some clarification on that. Certainly not tonight, but in the future, because this is something I've never heard of before. And it's something that we should be aware of, I think. So like to
Yeah,
understand.
and I, as we've talked about before, I think we're moving in the direction of,
Probably all projects will have culture.
almost all projects.
Yeah, I just, like I said, this is, I understand sphere of influence, Trinidad's area of influence, but I've never heard that the Rancheria has invoked that. So I would like to make sure I understand that. Just as a heads up to the agent and property owner, I have some questions about these fiber rolls. And so when we get an opportunity to hear from you, I don't quite understand how permanent they are. And so I'd like to understand that in more detail. Very quickly. Again, I think most of my issues will be clarified once we get into the discussion. One thing, I'll hold that off to conditions of approval as well. So any other questions that we have on the staff report?
I think I've asked my fair share. I'm satisfied.
Okay. Then what I'd like to do is give the property owner and the agent an opportunity to maybe brief us very quickly overall for the overall project. And then there are a number of questions that at least I know, and probably all of us have, with respect to the drawing package that we just need clarification on. And so I don't want to take a lot of time, but we certainly want to give you the opportunity to clarify the project and help us understand.
Many of you already know me, but I'm Julian Berg, the architect that Neil has hired to do the project, and I'm a local guy born and raised here, so it's really exciting to work on something in our community. I really love working on designs and buildings that I think are appropriate for North Coast setting. Neil and his family have been great to work with on this. It's a project he's been wanting to do a long time and a place for his family to gather. We've also been working closely with Trevor and the rest of the city staff to ensure that the project is meeting or exceeding the standards that the city is requiring. Collaborating with several local professionals. Really great. We have all engineers and educated people that help do all these studies that are required for both on-site septic, the stormwater and drain, and mechanical study. Let's go ahead and go to the site plan. And I'll briefly go through this because I think you've all in the packet. So, it went. Cooperating. You might try the arrow button.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. keeping the driveway entrance at the existing location. As you can see there, there's already a sort of a temporary gate and access way. And the driveway meanders back to the house site. Neil and I did a lot of meetings out the site to figure out where it should go and determine this great spot. It's from Langford and Scenic when you're out there looking at it. We're keeping most of the vegetation, well, all of it along Langford. That's there now, and most of it along Scenic. The garage is tucked underneath. You can see those car triangles are. We did this to work with the existing site contours and help hide the garage. It also allows the house living space to be higher and for better solar gain and sun access. The lower southern section, you can see a hatched area. Laser pointer, I'm gonna have that in my bag from now on, I think. But that berm help use up to the house, and also from the house it will help wind or traffic noise from Scenic. We're going to plant that with native plants and shrubs. It's going to look like it really fits in. The septic will be in this open grass area, which, as Trevor pointed out, it is designed to accommodate both the house and the ADU. One of the reasons we wanted to do that is just to be sure this would all fit in the long term. Neil doesn't have any intention of building the ADU in the immediate future, on budget and how everything goes. But it's nice to have the option to do that, and we think we can get these days. Most of the large spruce and fir trees will be maintained. We are, as Trevor pointed out, we're proposing to remove trees along the south side, along Scenic, which have the risk of falling on Scenic. Of course, there's the threat of wildfire, which could start up Scenic. It will also help Asbury Fire Departments. We're trying to design this house as close as possible to net zero with a large solar array on the roof, lots of south-facing glass and perpetual gain. Is essential for this to function well. We'll be planting the hillside below with types of ocean spray, ceanothus, ox myrtle, the silk tassel, and salal. I'd be open to other suggestions of it as well. But the idea is, as the stumps remain, they will rot away over time, but the roots of the native plants are going to take hold, in 3 or 4 years and really stabilize that hillside. Why don't we go to erosion control plan, which is sheet A1.3. It's a couple of so we did a pretty extensive erosion control plan, and so you see the wider black lines, raw wattles, which are pretty typical when you're doing development these days, especially with all of our waterway coastal sites. But these raw wattles, you can find them at most yards, and they hold the soil and filter any water passing through. They probably last a couple of years before they fully disintegrate. I've seen some last actually probably 3 or 4. Once again, is that they'll sit there and hold any sediment back, and maintain really until the plants would come in and stabilize the soil. Well, you can see the blue hatched area there. We've got a couple larger swales. They're going to capture all the runoff and driveway runoff and keep it from going over the hill. I did review this several times with Dagan. And we worked together on coming up with a plan that we think will work well. He hasn't officially approved it, but he gave me a verbal approval that this solution would be good. I added in an overflow because he was worried about if those swales were to fill up during a huge rain event, not your typical rain event, but a peak rain event. And it would potentially go over that hillside and cause erosion. But in this case, it would through a 6-inch clip pipe. Actually, I did say 6-inch HDPE plastic double wall drainage pipe. And that will go into a rock outfall and then down onto the road. In my experience, I just don't think there's be much water because you have significant swales. The other thing that we are proposing a metal roof. We could do rainwater collection for irrigation. Gardens. I don't know if I need to go into the floor plan too much, but I already talked about the garage being tucked under in the basement. Yeah, if you want to have to jump ahead to A2. After the visuals. There's the garage tucked in on the basement level. The main living spaces where we have the open kitchen, living, dining, which was important to Asian place type of house. The bathroom on the first floor. And
Dog washing station.
yeah, there's a dog washing station as well. Right on the deck. They're not allowed in the house. They don't got it right. Large south facing deck. Top floor, we have an additional bedroom for then with the bathroom. Go ahead and jump into the exterior. There's the roof plan, which you can see the solar panel layout. Showing the downspout locations. Next slide is getting into exterior views. So this is the main front view that too much from the road, but we have large overhang for rain protection, terraces, bump outs, stepped roof heights, corner windows, sliding doors, exciting textures, which all help break up the massing of the building and contribute pleasing and well balanced design. But I'm biased, right? So the exterior finishes I'm showing on this sheet as well, which is a palette of earth tones, blend the structure with the natural stone elements. Also as a wing, local rock find here in Trinidad. It really grounds the house to the site. The plant site. The elements fire resistant. They have high quality frames, longevity, and complement. Accents for wood, and like the black standing seam metal roofing, rainwater collection. And I think the black color will really help it blend in with the surrounding air as well. It is all
directed night sky front. Pretty much a requirement building on those lighting options on sheet A2.
I go through the visuals then.
I have maybe one question about
I'll-
the visual site.
Well, I can do the questions at the end, but why don't I give you a quick overview of the visuals? If you want to go up, it's at the beginning. We did a pretty comprehensive study, right? Yeah, here we go. Looking at different sites around Trinidad, just to be sure that the house was visible from locations, and this was one of the requirements of the commission. They really for the and doing that, we found that you really can't see it. I mean, with the way the existing trees and distances are to sites. So when I scroll down, I can walk you through. Because I think it's clear where the locations are. Go ahead and go down to the images to the house site. And then there's existing 80 to 100 tall conifer trees where that touching is. So you're not going to see it on the beach. And then go ahead. So you can see on the left there, there's a site, there's a large 80 foot tall there. It's really hard to see in the images, but the site is behind those trees if you look at the second image. Right.
Only United Healthcare Medicare Advantage plans come with a U card, a simple member card that only works for what's that. We got you.
100 feet. You're probably a couple hundred feet down in elevation, right? From maybe 300 feet. Yeah. That's so far away. So anyway, so we really don't feel this project will have any significant impact on neighbors. We're also mentioned encroachment permit has already been negotiated with the county for the driveway portion because it says it's split jurisdiction. But at least we're getting a lot of time and energy has gone into this project, and we want the sense that that's to the Trinidad. So thank you project. We're excited to take it to the next. Your comments?
Can I ask one quick question before we step so I can put in this?
I think you should stay.
I'm not going anywhere.
Well, just
I
like,
changed the floor.
could you scroll that down to, just since we've got
Sure.
these images on this, image number 8, and I could probably figure this out if I was smarter. Image number 8 and 9, can you tell us which parts of the house are indicated there in the red line? It's the first one, right?
Yeah, on image 9, and this is my best guess at this point since the house built. That roof line there would be the kitchen corner. If you look at the floor plan, or kitchen corner there. And there's 2 shading hatching on there, the low itself, and then
Cooper, Kitty, are you in? Cooper's in. Mama Cat's in. Diamond's in.
On your iPhone, can you mute yourself, please?
once again, when you're on scenic drive, you're down, I don't know, been in on site, you're down quite a ways, so you really can't see it as you look up. Any other questions on the view study?
Your questions, clarifications, comments?
I don't have any questions. I appreciate the thoroughness of this assessment of particularly the views. Obviously, that's a very sensitive topic here in town. I think that the applications that's quite thorough. I leaving any stone unturned.
Thank you. Type A.
Mr. Berg, I've got 9 questions for you.
Okay.
Again, before I begin with those, I just want to, reiterate those comments that it's clear that not only has it gone into all of this, but it seems to me anyway that you've had to jump through an extraordinarily high number of hoops. I don't know the height of those hoops, but certainly a lot of them. So
More than your typical resident.
that would be my assumption. Yeah, thanks. Okay. So again, being May 13th meeting, whatever, could you walk me through the process of how you assemble a site plan? You'll see where I'm going eventually. I guess my first question is so there's features like property boundaries and fault lines and contour lines. And I assume that those aren't hand drawn or, digitally placed by you. They come from some JS database somewhere, right?
It was subdivided adjacent. They did a bit of mapping, so we used that to do this, to create the contour layout. And then the property lines were done from a combination of county and maps and that subdivision map, which they had to do a pretty extensive report for that subdivision, actually, for one lot. But yeah, it is also interesting that drive how that came about.
And then when you're,
But in terms of the process of,
I've got a few follow-up questions actually.
okay, do you want more information on the design process?
In just a moment, yes, please.
Oh, okay.
So when you're building a floor plan, for example, is there a door template in whatever program you're using, sort of drag it, snaps into place? And how do you?
Well,
I was looking at
it's a door. It's a door library part. It's a 3D part. I haven't developed a 3D into this because of the time that takes. So I did the plans are starting. Built the whole model.
Sweet. If you guys approve it.
Well, I find that I like to start out with hand drawing because that's just my process. Makes it flow better and I can think a little clearer.
Sure.
Computers are so accurate, you can be a little more.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's actually the crux of my question. I'm curious about this geologic trench, whether its placement on your plan is the result of mapping, or whether it was sort of hand drawn by you, or whether it came from a JS database. I guess my broader question is, was there any inference on your end about placement of that line?
This was
actually
coordinates are well. A little in summertime. It's very clear. You can see a lighter shade of grass, and it's a little depressed. So Neil and I measured it from the top of that. Yeah,
and it's exactly where it's supposed to be.
The house is laid up.
Yeah,
You can see on the map.
That was gonna be a question. I just wanted to ensure that you were 100% certain about where that trench lies,
right.
because it seemed like.
But yeah, we've actually staked the house.
And it settled, it seems, right? So that's the concern was.
Neil and I have taken. We did an initial staking of it, and then we kept adjusting the design as we learn more and decided to move some rooms around, make it flow better. And we're always looking at where that trench line was, make sure it would fit. So,
You can imagine why I'm curious about it, right? Because it really does sort of constrain. It can do without a bunch of extra engineering. If you're 100% certain that that's where it is and it's planned appropriately around it, then I am satisfied with that. I've got just 2 questions remaining for you then. What benefits were achieved? Second story. Did you ever contemplate that grade?
The benefit is partially the view and partially because of that geologic trench, we were pretty limited on our site area, and they wanted to have some garden area in front of the house, But
I say front, but and I would say those were the two main reasons.
And to add interest, I think if it was all one story with a basement, it would look too ranch.
Ranch-like and kind of not be very interesting.
All right. And then I just got one more comment about design, just to encourage you to use, I certainly appreciate the downward directed lighting, but I noticed that they are non-dimmable. And I think that there's a lot of benefits, both sort of aesthetically, pictures and stuff.
Every single light is coming beyond reach.
Yeah, say those are, so
Inside out.
that runs.
They're also 2700K is the color temperature, which tends
To be a little more, I would say, in line with these lights.
to have a more yellow tone. Not, I absolutely hate the
Not that-
blue LED lights. They make me crazy.
So I have no additional questions for the applicant's agent, but I'm looking forward to my upcoming lesson in forestry. Yeah. Well, that was just me.
Oh, yeah, good.
Yeah, I just, I'll just go through a couple of things. Sure. One of the things that I was interested in is, I'm kind of paraphrasing here because I don't recall exactly what it was, but in page A1, the map trace of the Trinidad fault. So I understand that there was an evaluation made to say that all the development was far enough away from that. And it specifically addressed the septic tank, the leach field, the building itself. And I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to make sure. The one thing that looks closest to me is the propane tank. And the associated lines with that. Can you verify that that is still within the range, the allowable range to the fault?
I have a question if you can put a propane tank in the area, but it's
The 50-foot setback only applies to habitable
Right.
structures. So a garage could actually be outside of that building.
they're trying to keep, death or injury from happening in habitable space. So propane tank slab wouldn't
Maybe
qualify, or a garage.
Maybe I misunderstood. I thought that they also addressed the leach field as well, but maybe confusing myself.
That was not part of.
That was probably the R1. That might have been the R1 report. Did you look at? I didn't send you the full report. It was a separate.
That was the full-on report by LACO done in 2000.
Yeah, I sent them the R1 report, but I didn't send the full report.
Something like 35 or 40 pages. I only printed the conclusions and recommendations of that one.
But if by definition it is only habitable, then that answers my question, but I just want to make sure. Okay.
That you do have to place a propane tank on a engineered slab.
Yes, of course.
Got rebar and all that.
So on plate A1.3, there's 3 little sketches here for some erosion control measures. And I understand we talked about the fiber roll. I didn't understand the first 2 though, the infiltration trench detail. I don't even know where that is. Where is that?
That is wherever you see the dashed black line. Up to the screen. Basically, it's a French drain. You dig a trench and you place drain rock. I'm calling 3.5 inch diameter clean drain rock.
Right.
And that's placed basically in filter fabric so it doesn't silt up.
Right.
And that the perforated drain allows water to percolate
Into the ground throughout that drain.
system. So by the time the drain gets to your swale, there may not be much water left. So the swale is kind of if you put it up on the screen, I can run over there and point it out.
Yeah.
I think it's the ones labeled French drains.
Yeah, it says French drain to landscaper. I probably should have said per detail.
Oh, I see.
But
Yeah, I couldn't find detail one. That was what it was.
Per detail.
Okay, I got it. Okay, now it happened. Okay. And then the item 2, the pop-up emitter detail, I see that. And that's just basically as an overflow.
Basically, that's at the tip of your grassy drainage swales.
Any water that come up, then go to the swale.
Okay, so there are multiple,
There's 2 of those pop up
Okay,
at the end of
there's 2.
each drain system. So there's one for the
I see,
lower.
I see. Okay, thank you.
I know these sheets there's a lot of info on each sheet.
Well, see.
So okay, so I'm just walking through the drawings here. So my question is, I really appreciate all of the images that you've taken in various locations. I'm amazed that this coastal commission is now concerned about views like this, that they bypass some very large projects in the area.
Right.
They had more staff.
Okay. But my question is, there are no images from other parcels on Langford. I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Let's see. If we go to the site plan, you want to pull that.
I think that was done because there was a request from the coastal commission to these sites.
Yeah, that's true.
Which showed us the sites based on their.
I understand that. Oh, you're saying that they requested these specific sites?
Yeah, they didn't care about the adjacent sites. Yeah,
Because they care about public views.
that's right.
I understand.
And incidentally, I don't think they'll see the house.
I'm doing my best to wait to see that.
No, and that's why I said I think I knew the answer, but I wanted to make certain. So, I think that's it. That part. Yeah. Any other questions at this point?
Not for Mr. Bird, but it's
Okay. And again, we'll come back to the public so that everyone has an opportunity to. So we're not done yet.
So I didn't have any prepared remarks. I'm happy to just talk off the cuff. And if you want to know anything about the history of the property, I've owned it for 15 years. We acquired it. We had a contract a year before it was actually split because it took so long to get it through the process. But as soon after we acquired it, my wife passed away within 5 months. And so I kept it until now I've retired. And so now it's my project to build a house. And so I've had a lot of time to think about what I want. In fact, without Julian, I would have brought to you a really horrendous plan that you would have rejected, and I would have thanked you for it later. There's a 38-foot tall building that a nice lady helped me design. I was referred to Julian by Gabe in the city council office, and just had a great time. Over several iterations, the house hasn't anything look like what we started. Thankfully, really, I appreciate this to make it turn into what I wanted, which is something that really is obscure from the outside, exposes the views from the inside, and then to have the beautiful panoramic view and the solar gains and allows us to. It's really kind of a dream that worked, and it also fits into the contour of the slope. I mean, it's a bit of a sloping lot, and it just sort of seems to fit the natural surroundings. So I could go on and on if you like.
I've got some specific questions for you, if you don't mind. And like I said, I think the design is incredibly thoughtful. Everything that you've just said, I feel like that's very much true. Almost impossible to see it unless you're on a boat, right? Like it's
Yeah, you can see it from the ocean, that means I can too see the ocean.
wear clothes when I'm paddling around, I guess.
Okay.
So my bigger concerns are with the tree removal.
Yeah.
And the use permit for the tree removal. And I asked Trevor for your copy of the justification or rationale for tree removal. I've got just one copy, but I can pass it along if you folks would like to see it. So you've broken it into sort of discrete benefits of tree removal. I wanted to, again, not like put you on the defensive and make you justify all of this, but I do have some questions about some of these things. Because really, the finding or issuance of the use permit says the proposed use at the site and intensity contemplated at the proposed location will provide a development that is necessary or desirable for and compatible with the neighborhood or the. As I assess whether or not that finding can be met, I've got some questions about the proposed benefits of tree. And I think probably the most straightforward of those is there's some trees here which pretty obviously got to go, right? Like tree S, that's where the porch is going to be. That's kind of
That's also a disease tree.
exactly right from that. Right here. So that's I forget which disease it is, but
Foamy's pine. They changed the name since it went to forestry school.
So R&S got to go. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Okay.
And also, by the way, R is gone now. God took. Oh, it fell over in the wind.
Which way did it go?
It went.
Can you tell me a little bit about the natural history of these conchs, right? I guess I'm sort of most interested in if there are these diseases, how do they spread? Is it spores or their fruiting body?
Yeah. So
mushroom stuff. I don't know.
Well, Foamy's pine is also known as white speck. It's one of the most common diseases. We see it. It's endemic across the North Coast. Often goes in through a scar of some kind, and it's an air conch. It's situated mid the bowl, often on one flank of the tree, and that's what you'll see in one tree that's infected. Ultimately, the disease work that affects the tree, the tree will ultimately die, often from a secondary fungus.
Yeah. So are these the only two trees on the property that have some sort of disease?
Well, I didn't look at the others specifically. I looked at all the ones that I cut down, but superficially, one seemed to be fine.
Question I was prepared to ask. I'm sorry, an answer to the question. Percentage of trees in that general vicinity would you expect? But you haven't gone out and surveyed, so totally off the record. Just
no, I would say it's Foamy's pine is one of the most common diseases of Douglas fir. There are other diseases, but other species. Ramorn, an example, sudden of death disease is pretty prevalent around the southern part of the range, but not here. But I would say if there are other comments about what you might find locally, you can go out in the log yard and see quite a bit of white speck in lawn.
So how readily can the disease spread, I guess is one question. I mean, is there a chance that if they would spread it to?
Well, sure. Every year they put spores out, and every has an open cord, a wound of some kind, or what have you, and it falls off.
Awesome. So it is possible that, in fact, these trees remaining infects not only other trees on the property, potentially affecting the screening that those trees offer, but also might affect neighboring trees. Is that true as well?
It's possible, sure.
Okay. Like the distance those spores travel? It doesn't matter. It's fine. I get it. All right.
No, you've stumped the band.
Okay, perfect. Good. Then I have no further questions. I'm just kidding. Okay. So this goes back to the question I asked Trevor earlier. The assertion that removal of those trees has no effects on slope stability. I'm confused a bit by the logic that the slope is clearly unstable, as evidenced by the pistil budding of the trees. Yeah. But simultaneously, removal of those trees doesn't actually affect slope stability. Confused by that logic. So anyway, can you describe the predicted effects of removal of trees on slope stability, like with your forestry expertise?
Yeah, so conifer trees of this size generally have a 7-year, the root system generally has a 7-year lifespan. And so over that 7-year period, you'll just slowly see that root system decay. So that's why it's important to right away put something back in place that will create that same slope stability. But these are not deep-seated landslides there. This is, if you've been out there, you know you can draw your finger in the sand on the sheer cliffs of Scenic Drive. It's mostly uplifted beach sand. And so that's slowly sloughing away and sloughing down. And so you can affect the stability of that by putting something on it that will continue to moisture there. But it's pretty well drained. I mean, that's the nice thing about sand is it drains really well. In fact, I dug a hole 5 feet deep for the power pole that I have a permit for, and it rained 5 inches thereafter, and there's no water in the bottom of a 5-foot hole. And so it drains pretty well. So I'm not worried about a deep-seated landslide moving. But what could happen, and I think the most likely windstorm, take those trees old, because they're on that steep bank and they're on sort of sandy slopes, that if those trees, they're going to get bigger and bigger and get a bigger sail. And so it really isn't the ground stability itself. It's the fact that it's unstable ground with trees that have big roots anchored in it. And those, if you've seen just Scenic Drive this last year, you've seen 2 or 3 trees that have already gone moved. I've lived here 45 years, so I've seen a number of trees. For those that I predicted, in fact,
So you're predicting these trees will in fact
ultimately, well,
every tree goes over before the heat.
yes, I hope I live long enough to prove it so, but yes, those trees will fall over.
So just that was lots of good. Which I have more time to talk about forestry. So do you 7 years from now envision any consequence these trees?
No, it's my objective. You see, I have also a vested interest in keeping the hillside where it exists. That's why I propose to put revegetation immediately, and to do it also with what I know will work. I'm kind of a fan of ocean spray. I just like the way it looks. It's beautiful, and so I'd like to get that arrayed as best I can in that whole slide. I would also like to remove the pampas grass if I could. I didn't include that because you might put it as a condition. I didn't know if I'm strong enough to get out by the time. Yeah, I think your question was 7 years from now, what would I predict would happen? I predict a well-established area there with native plants. And the trees that were at risk of blowing over.
Again, not being a botanist, not being a forester, I don't really know a lot about the root structures of the existing trees versus the trees or bushes, shrubs, ocean spray, and and the lot. How do the root structures compare, right? Do they offer as much stability or more stability or less stability?
Well, certainly, if you're considering raindrop erosion, or the sheet erosion would come from different rain, right? As soon as you get a vegetative cover, you've essentially accomplished that, right? And again, the erosion that I'm concerned about is what happens when the tree erupts the whole root ball out of the ground, which you can drive down, and see it. Now that will cause a tremendous amount of future climate. But what I think will happen is the big trees are removed, that's eliminated, and then I'll have some interwoven shrubs that, ocean spray can get 2 inches diameter or more in a mature specimen. And so it's going to be more like the blue blossom kind of cover you see across a lot of the Scenic Drive corridor.
Continuing to talk about tree removal for indefinite future. That area on the southernmost part of the property has what would appear to be the steepest slope, right? Do trees, they would appear to be N, O, P, and Q, sort of creeping around westward. Those all, are they also affected by slope instability, which is to say, do you suspect that those might all?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which of those are the worst offenders if you have sense?
Oh, you want a grading system?
I do. Yes, very much so. Because you said they all can be removed, so I'm just curious whether in fact there is a hierarchy.
Well, if you look at the trees on top of the slope, they would be subject to the same kind of effect. They would just, the only trees actually that wouldn't cause this sort of effect of the two disease trees, one that's gone over and the other one that's so far up that it wouldn't have an opportunity to create bank erosion if it blew over. All the rest of them, when the roots come over, the roots, it's not entirely true, but if you look at the crown and then consider how big the root system is underneath it, that's what you're dealing with in terms of the ability to disturb soil. Now, often root walls are smaller than that, but because they can break, that could be a tremendous impact for essentially all of them.
Yeah, something that occurs to me. So all of the area where trees will be removed will be revegetated, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Are all of the trees immediately to the south of the property, the ones that we were discussing initially, that's D, F, G, H, I, J, M, and N? Those are those are all at least 30 feet in height at the moment?
Yeah. There's one that's dead. And, I could have cut it, the rules and cut one out. But I'm going to wait for people who are, as much as I've had the chainsaw, I'd rather have someone who's good with it, do it all.
They are, in fact, as you observed, within striking distance of the property. I mean, they are. It would appear to be what now? They are within striking, but to use your term, striking distance from the property.
Yeah, of the house.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they would appear to be like the house is at least 30 feet from that break in the slope. Is that correct? So it would have to be at least 30 feet to reach the house.
Yeah. So these are, I think we said 120 foot trees that we posed in the review. Those are the trees that are essentially these are the ones in one of the photographs we said that would remain on the adjoining property. They're essentially consistent with that cohort of trees. Born at the same time.
I was massively underestimating the size of those trees. Could you rattle off approximate heights of them if you don't mind?
No. I mean, I'd just be guessing.
That's better.
I'd say 100 to 120 feet.
And that's all of them? D, F, G,
Oh, no, there's some of them that are shorter, of course.
Which are those?
I don't know.
I think, Julian, you have some circles are bigger than others, so do those indicate the
That's
bigger
like-
trees? Yeah.
Yeah. F is the biggest, M seems second biggest.
Yeah, I mean, I did measure them all and I had I don't know what I put in there, but I did measure them all to determine that they were the smallest trees on the property. Except for the one that's diseased, but all the big, what I call specimen trees, those all were removed. Yeah.
Yeah, so attachment 9 on page 15.
Which attachment? I'm sorry.
Attachment number 9, page 15 of the document I wrote regarding treatment.
So this
Here, we'll
was,
show it to you.
So just to keep us oriented here, walking through your list of rationale for removal, we've covered disease trees, geologic stability, still somewhat skeptical of some of those claims. Proximity to proposed residence, we've established now, as of this most recent discussion, that most of those trees are in fact within certain distance.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that most of the strong winds accompanying winter storms arrive from the south. thus magnifying the risk that the trees may fall in the opposite direction towards the north, as that one did just fall towards the proposed home.
Correct.
But that justification wouldn't seem to apply to the trees that aren't.
Due south of the house?
Well, it's still fall over, but yes, you're right, they wouldn't
Necessarily strike the house in
in the path of south fallen tree or north fallen tree.
Okay. I mean, I'm trying to determine the extent to which each of your rationale apply to each of you.
Yeah, that's right. They're all not diseased and, liable to fall over. They all don't require all the same justification.
Well, that's why they're linked.
Totally. Yep. I'm on board with that. I agree. Again, determine the overall benefits. Which represents the most likely and immediate hazard? Trees falling atop the house or falling onto scenic trail?
I don't know how to predict that. I certainly wouldn't write a report that put my license on the line that said this is going to happen in favor of one or the other.
But they both represent risk, so just add probabilities that they'll happen.
Yeah, have you driven down some drive? Have you
Seen the trees that have fallen?
I don't know. I've seen the trees. I don't have a.
I went there because the power was out. I wanted to see why.
Knowledge of the trees that exist on.
Yeah, so the trees do fall.
No doubt, trees fall. I travel a bit, and sometimes I dabble in travel photography. So I've got this nifty app called Numbers, and it's pretty cool because you can model, for example, how lengthy the Great Pyramid shadow will be on the autumnal equinox 2027. But it's got some more practical applications. I used it straight to an engineering firm that a proposed new engineering building on the campus would actually shade the prized greenhouse. So they had to alter their plans accordingly. And I plopped 100-foot posts in the approximate location of some of these trees. I just looked at the shadow cast by those trees at different times here. No doubt in the winter, even relatively short trees will cast pretty long shadows into that southern exposure, right?
Yeah.
But, by the time the vernal equinox rolls around, it looks to me like tree E casts a shadow on the house part of the time and only until about 9:30 a.m. But by the time
How long the shade is on?
yeah, sure. And then by the time the summer solstice rolls around, tree E doesn't appear to shade the proposed residence at all. Next. With the sun rising in the east-northeast, the panels spend infinitely more time shaded by the proposed bedroom 3 on the second floor than any of the trees you're proposing to remove.
So I guess I'm not quite sure why we're looking at individual trees. Is there an issue here of the plan holistically?
Yeah, right. So we've got this list of proposed benefits of tree removal that we're trying to assess, whether there's a net benefit to removal of these trees.
Yes. I
And
agree.
so we've been given this list of many rational reasons, and I just wanted to work my way through them. In the case of this tree E, and I didn't have time at 11:30 to place it in their vision along that bank. But at least where tree E is, in the summer equinox, there's no shadow casted by that tree. So,
Well, again, I guess what I was saying was that we're looking at this each criteria for removal, we're looking at individually. When I look at this somewhat of a more higher perspective, I would definitely say that I would want to remove tree E for one of the other criteria, which was to improve the view. So it's difficult for me to understand why we're looking at each tree with each criteria, when in fact, I think you have to look at you could look at it overall and say, hey, a lot of those trees like F, G, H, I, J, M, D, and even N are certainly ones that he wants to remove for view, which I don't think falls into the same category as whether or not it casts a shadow.
yeah, that's fair enough. I'm just trying to assess the overall, the risks and costs and benefits. And
Okay, well, I don't disagree with that. I just wanted to know where you were going with this.
because it does seem to me that let me ask a question differently. If we deny the use permit for tree removal, would you still build the house?
Would I?
Yeah.
That's an unfair question, really, because you're putting me in a position where I have to answer in a way that would potentially offend this panel. And choose not to do that. So thank you for, but, and that's a hypothetical and really unfair. So,
Well, one of the trees falls within the footprint, so that answers your question.
I'd like to add something. I was here during the, was it 2005 windstorms when we, when we lost a lot of trees. In fact, I had worked on a house further down Scenic Drive and the trees came within 10 feet of the house. And we're talking these massive Sitka spruce trees. And that storm was really unique because the trees fell in all different directions because the winds came in and they sort of swirled. And you can't really predict what direction a tree's going to fall. I just want to add that, you know, we're looking at a tree could fall down on Scenic Drive or it could fall towards, you know, a proposed house. We really can't predict that.
well, either way, it's bad news, isn't it? I mean, if there's a dislocation, any way those trees fell.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm happy.
And again, I don't mean to seem combative at all. And I forgive, I certainly apologize if that's the impression.
Well, I apologize for feeling or defensive.
But I guess my hypothetical question, which I did not mean to offend you with, was that, you know, you've argued that this is the minimum number of trees. I guess this question is maybe more appropriate for the commission than for you, which is any reason that any tree needs to be removed good enough to remove them sort of collectively grouped together? You know, I mean, maybe that doesn't make sense, but there ought to be a reason for removing each tree, and I just want to make sure there was in fact a reason for removing each individual tree. Right? Maybe like,
Well, they're all in the view.
Or they'll all hit the house. And so that
Venn
diagram.
diagram fits every tree in those two.
Now, there are other reasons,
Aside from either,
putting shade on the house or falling on also appropriate, like public safety, you know.
yeah, that's a very dangerous curve. For sure.
Yeah, and not to mention the requirement building map. Those things would be essentially a wonderful firelighter to my roof to the extent that it's metal. I'll get to understand how warm it will get with ashes on it. But I'd like to avoid that. I mean, there are a multitude of reasons.
I wouldn't expose them all to you, but the two most prevalent
Prevalent ones are the safety of the public and my house.
I mean, one of the reasons why I sort of got engaged in this overly complex thought exercise, and I was actually prepared to ask you for like a matrix listing which reasons apply to which trees, which of course I wouldn't do now because I hear you all loud and clear. But I think that what it comes down to is that, you know, I think you could have just said that ocean views from my home, and it's could, I probably would have. Well, because I appreciate that you and your agent acknowledge the value in preventing questions from price. Yes, well, as Mr. Bird is a type A, I'm a type AAA. So I've got one last question, which again, this one should be a completely inoffensive question.
Okay.
Is native vegetation more fire resistant than the existing trees?
I don't know that I could argue that any form of vegetation that I'm aware of is more or less fire resistant. Redwood trees are arguably so, but I've seen them burn up. So I don't like shrubs with, you know, glossy leaves and resins and oils. Not the species per se. It's the arrangement of those and creating fire ladders so that on steep ground, if you have continual vegetation from where the fire ignites, and so it'll continue to burn until it reaches the. Right now, if someone were to throw a cigarette on a sunny day, so and it caught a fire, it would eliminate our problem in discussion. I mean, we saw that 2 years ago, right, with the fire. Okay, I mean, that was. Which again,
I sounded defending myself.
I just wanted to ensure that each tree that we're proposing to remove.
Well, I took care of one.
Yep, that's right.
Sorry, good. In
Firewood.
Well, it will please the commission to know that I have no further questions.
So stand for other questions to the extent there are any.
Questions? I don't have any further questions. I guess I will follow up on the tree discussion, just with a note for Chris. I mean, I'm also a licensed forester and botanist. And what Neil had outlined in terms of slope stability regarding the trees, and then with the revegetation is certainly something that I'm comfortable with in terms of keeping that slope stable. Those native shrubs, while they do have different root structures than the trees that are currently present there, they also have, they're not just super shallow rooted, they also have deep roots that go down, and while the roots are smaller, there's more numerous of them, and it's going to be planting them in greater densities than the trees that are present. So that makes me feel comfortable about that bank not sloughing down on the scenic drive or something moving there. So I just want to say that to maybe make you feel.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate that.
I was just going to add, tree removal has definitely been sometimes controversial in Trinidad, both for and against. But I believe a lot of these trees are less than 12 inches, so it could be cut without a permit. Maybe it would have been better if we'd identified which ones actually required a permit, but I think the applicant was just trying to present this holistically. I think one thing we've recognized in the past with tree removal permits is the use permit findings they fit tree removal very well. And so I think when we update our ordinances, that we'll probably have a different set of findings for tree removal. It does make considering them a little tough. But I think also bottom line is I don't think that there's really, someone can request to remove a tree for whatever purpose, they want. The ordinance doesn't require a specific reason.
Well, again, I appreciate, I was just attempting to do my due diligence, and you've jumped through many hoops.
Testify that you have.
You've jumped through many hoops thus far, and I thought that those relatively few hoops wouldn't be too detrimental to the overall process. But thank you for everybody's patience, and I'm satisfied with the responses. Thanks.
Great. Any last minute questions? Okay. I'm going to open it up for public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone from either here in this area or online through Zoom to make comments. I would appreciate if you could keep the comments to 3 minutes, and we'll open it up for public comments at this point. And we would ask that if you are in the room, if you come to the microphone so that we can make sure we have you on the record.
I must say this has been an interesting experience. I've never sat in on one of these before. I live across the street, Langford Road.
I'm sorry, could you state your name, please?
I'm sorry, Leslie Zondervan-Droz. And I have had the property across the road for about 44 years. Okay. Anyway, after the place stopped being a cow pasture, I was assuming that it was going to be built on. And I was worried that there was going to be somebody from Southern California who was going to come up and do a McMansion and want the whole neighborhood to change according to their standards. I'm very glad that it's not one of those people. And I'm very glad about the downward facing lights too. My issue, and the issue that my family has, is a very different perspective than probably the other ones you're going to hear. And that is, we're very protective of the forest and the wildlife. That's our main concern. And it's not the view or anything else. So the rather unkempt view you have across the road is the way things are going to be, because we want to keep it, except for the ivy, which my grandson is working on bit by bit. So anyway, we're focused on the wildlife, the forest behind our houses on Langford, and the forest that happens after the steep slope that goes from your place over to the rancheria. That forest all has some very special wildlife in it. And one thing I want you to know is that Northern Scenic Drive is the southernmost part of mountain lion territory. And the mountain lions are always going to be there. So what we have done is I just don't let small grandchildren out by themselves. Okay, but about every other year in April and May, I hear the mountain lion and her cubs talking to each other below my bedroom window. Okay. And I know that one of the places they run through is that cow pasture. And so I would hope that you would arrange things not to obstruct them, but also to protect your small grandchildren. Let's see, the other thing is some of the very special wildlife that is there. I mean, is very special. And I brought it up recently. I've been keeping it quiet, but because of what the rancheria is doing, I had to come public with it. But we have had spotted owl in our forest behind our houses there. And so one of our concerns would be, I don't care about the view or any of the other stuff, but the spotted owls have a fairly large territory. And I have heard them over at the Dobrex and in the cow pasture area, but they'd like to stay in the high trees. And so I don't think whatever you're going to do is going to affect them unless you decided to start clearing the forest between your place and the Dobrex. Because I think the wildlife actually runs through that area and comes over to my place.
Spent some time studying about that. The biggest food prey they have is the dusty-footed wood rat. They love wood rats. And I have 2 wood rat nests on the property.
Actually, the barred owls like the low critters, like the wood rats. The spotted owls tend to hunt in the canopy.
Yes, and the wood rats are arboreal and nocturnal.
Oh, okay, then, great.
Okay. We can debate this later. We have something.
Okay, so I just wanted to express that my concern is doing as little as possible to interfere with who's already living there.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any public comment on Zoom? Okay, hearing none. We'll bring it back to the commission. Any other final comments or questions or clarifications, or can we begin to discuss a motion?
I guess I had a couple questions. I don't know. I guess we'll begin to discuss a motion maybe. I want to talk about the conditions a little bit.
Okay.
With the proposed conditions. Condition number 2, this is just a simple question. The 2-year period, is that to begin construction, to apply for a building permit?
Get a building permit.
Not to complete.
That's correct, yeah.
And then my other questions were on, which you sort of explained earlier, conditions 8 and 9. I guess when I first read those, not knowing the background information, it sounded like something that might be addressed with a grading permit or by the building inspector, I guess, especially number 8. I mean, I think the grading permit would likely specify that the driveway drain away from the septic system, and the building inspector would see to that, or is that something that he wouldn't?
Well, it's not like a listed requirement in the grading ordinance, so, and it didn't come up with the city engineer or the health department, but I thought that was important, and so that would be a requirement for the grading plan when it comes for.
I mean, I agree that it's important, and I don't want to.
You're just wondering if it's covered elsewhere?
Yeah, or like if it's really our purview to put that in place versus.
I think so. I think it's our purview, and I don't know that it's covered anywhere else.
Okay, thank you. And I guess I had, and then on number 9, I guess I would probably, obviously would not be covered, or I didn't think would be covered elsewhere, but my thought with adding the curb to keep vehicles from driving onto the beach field. I guess I thought that might just be the applicant's sort of responsibility to his own benefit rather than something we needed to force his hand to do. I sort of see both sides of it.
I mean, yes, it would be in the applicant's interest, but a lot of people might be somewhat ignorant, like maybe the house changes hands and someone's never had a leach field before and doesn't understand that driving on that's bad. We have had conditions before. The health department has added that for some projects. I don't know. I'm not sure why they didn't require it for this one, because it seems like it would be one that they would require something like that. Again, and I think it is, the city does have an ordinance to manage and protect septic systems, so I do think it is something that it's.
Any other questions, comments? Do I hear a motion?
Based on the information submitted in the application included in the staff report and public testimony at the hearing, I find that the project is consistent with the city's LCP and other applicable regulations. And I move to adopt the information, the design review and use permit and other findings in the staff report and approve the project as submitted and as conditioned in this report, in the staff report.
Your second?
I'll second, because I'm the virtual, I can't say that, right?
I can second too.
No, well, then go for it.
I'll second. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, project is approved as submitted here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know it's sometimes very long and detailed process, but unfortunately, we're not experts in a lot of the fields that others are. So appreciate your patience and.
I thank you for the time that you have all. Thank you. Obviously, it's been graduation night for some of us here tonight, so. It's making it worth the wine.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we take 2 minutes? Don't feel like you have to leave. Item number 3 on our agenda, the ADU ordinance discussion regarding a draft ADU ordinance, which was continued from the November 15th, 2023 meeting.
So, most of my staff report, you've already seen, starting on page 3, talks about what's new, updated information. Not much has changed in the ordinance since you last saw it. There's a couple of updates and comments in the margin. I am working with the Coastal Commission on a definition of habitable area. The Coastal Commission had a couple of comments. So those are the additions in here. So there was on page 6 on the conditions for projects that are within, near a bluff. Basically, they want to add this other condition on. I am going to follow up a little bit with them on that. Because I haven't seen it in other ordinances, and they seem to keep adding stuff to Trinidad's ordinance. Necessarily, I think Trinidad should have standards that don't apply to Humboldt County or Mendocino County, for example. But so this is basically saying if the sea level rises and all of a sudden your land where the ADU is on is now below mean high tide, then it's on public land. It seems unnecessary to me, but anyway, so I'm gonna follow up a little bit with them on that, but they requested that language. And then they also, we've gone back and forth a little bit on how many ADUs to allow, and do we really need to include all the state ordinance language, because there's just not the multifamily development in Trinidad but they wanted us to add it because that's what the state law is. So there's this new section 1754070.1, and those are location standards. And so, I just wanted to avoid, this ordinance is already pretty complex for Trinidad, and regulates a lot of situations that are so unlikely to come up in Trinidad. But so this is basically just from the state law, saying where ADUs can be. They still have to meet septic requirements. I did talk to someone who said they just talked to the health department and they relaxed their standards for second units and septic systems. So that's another thing. I haven't talked to the health department with someone who was talking to someone about an ADU in Trinidad, said they talked to the health department and said it would be. So I'm going to follow up with the health department, because that would really change how many ADUs can be permitted in Trinidad. And then the sort of final issue was the issue of STRs. And so we talked about that, as you know, at the joint meeting with the STR committee and city council. And there was a lot to digest. So the city council wanted a little bit more time before weighing in. The STR committee didn't feel like they should weigh in, and sort of was dissolved as a committee anyway. And so at last week's city council meeting, they did take up that question. And so I sort of had some questions listed. They did generally agree 4-1 that the primary unit should be allowed to be an STR. Now that's not something that's restricted in the state law, but I have seen it in some coastal ordinances. And so that's where that question came up. So the Coastal Commission may say they think the primary unit should not be allowed to be an STR, but I think with our cap, I don't see why not. But no to the other one. So we're not allowing any kind of STR, whether even if it's home share resident STRs, in an ADU with a use permit or not. So, and that's what the city council voted. So you can, if you feel strongly, you can certainly do something different, but that's how the ordinance is currently written based on that feedback from. That's all I have.
Questions, comments, clarifications from commissioners?
I want to say that there are currently some ADUs in town that are being rented as STRs. Is that
That's correct. Or at least some detached living spaces that maybe don't have a full kitchen or. Let's see. So there's one that I know of let's see. One for sure, let's see. Is there?
But that's the one that dropped their license this year.
Oh, well, and then no, there's one on view, yeah. So yeah, there's at least one. So yeah, it would probably be good we could add some clarifying language that says existing ADUs that are STRs can continue.
So they would be grandfathered.
I think they should be grandfathered. But then they also wouldn't fall under this ordinance so they would be existing, non-conforming. So I'd probably actually add that to one of those last sections for dealing with existing ADUs. So section starts at the bottom of page 15 of the ordinance, packet page 70, section 17.4.110. So that's the regulations for existing ADUs. So maybe under the non-conforming ADU sections, somewhere in here, I will put that ADUs that are STRs at the time this ordinance goes into effect can.
Any other questions, clarifications? So I just have a couple of general questions. Typically what we do is we would go through this ordinance page by page. But it sounds to me like there are still several fairly significant open issues that need to be resolved before we can actually say this is ready for prime time.
Oh, yes, I would not propose, I think it's certainly ready for you if you want to go through it page by page, and I think we have before. I didn't necessarily propose that because I think you guys have seen this ordinance quite a few times. And we have gone through page by page, but it is not ready for adoption. So the next step in the process, basically, I just want to follow up on those two things with the Coastal Commission, language for the public lands and the habitable space. And then we're going to send the ordinance to HCD for review. So Department of Housing and Community Development, they now have basically kind of veto power over ordinances that don't meet the state requirements. So once we get their sign off, then we can adopt it and send it to us. So you will see it. I want it to be, I don't want to have to make a bunch of changes after HCD reviews it, but we can certainly send them, if you make modifications, we could send them just those individual modifications and ask them. So, if there's significant issues that, we need to go over, then let's do that before we send it to HCD, but you will see it again. Yeah.
What's the pleasure? I guess my feeling is I don't feel the need to go through page by page. I do have a couple of questions that I would like to at least get clarified tonight. So if we just want to kind of hit the top of the ADU ordinance, that's fine with me too. So.
Yeah, that sounds good. I just have a few things.
Okay, well, why don't we plow right in?
Hold on.
Okay, well, I can start and then we can go from there. this is not necessarily in any order, but on page 5 of 20, of pages of the ED ordinance, your comment there at section C, ADU or JADU and any associated new development shall not be permitted on a property with known archaeological resources. My experience in the past has been that most tribal, well, I shouldn't say most, tribal organizations do not want to reveal where archaeological things are.
Yeah.
So to me, the question raised of whether or not to include it, it's unlikely that they certainly won't do a map.
No.
I doubt it now.
No way they'll do a map. So I guess it's more of a comment than anything, but I just don't think that be anything that we can enforce because we won't know.
I had a similar question on that one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about it before, and it's a tough one. It's a standard that I think the Coastal Commission wanted in there, but how do we? I mean, maybe staff has a map, and so staff can say, okay, I know this is a sensitive area, so that's a question. Maybe I'll ask the Coastal Commission if they expect a map or what they expect.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, archaeological resources don't necessarily have to be indigenous resources, but at the same time, I think trying to, I just found that it's going to be very difficult to even accomplish. So
Yeah.
You know.
I don't. And, you know, I think, as I sort of
Alluded to before, we're almost getting to the point where from comments I've heard that they would consider
consider all of Trinidad as,
it's an easy map to make them.
Anything 45 years.
Yeah, aside from, you know, I know that you still have to work with the Coastal Commission and Housing Organization. I don't really have any other specific comments, but I did want to get that one there.
I had on back page 62, page 7 of 20. It's the very bottom, letter C. I feel like maybe we talked about this. Isn't that changing? So, like, is that going to get flagged by HCD saying you can't sell the ADU from the primary unit?
that.
Is there something changing there where you can like independently sell an ADU from the primary unit? I don't know how that's supposed to work.
Maybe that does
But I
sound
feel like I've heard
familiar,
something.
that the law did just change. Okay. Coastal Commission didn't flag it. They're not necessarily up on that. I think you,
That can be real problematic when it comes to septic.
this,
Right.
yeah, I don't,
I have no idea how that's supposed to work.
yeah, I mean, that seems like it's basically a default subdivision. I don't understand how that works, but I mean, there already was SB 9. And then they just applied it to the coastal zone, right?
Today.
To this. It changes so much every year. Okay, I will look at that.
Okay, the next page, 8 of 20. I'm just responding to your comments. TP5, you're asking if we want a new meter for an ADU if it's larger than 800 square feet. Personally, I don't necessarily see the advantage of that. But like requiring that, it seems like if that's what the homeowner wants to do, sure. If they don't, they can say $1,000 or whatever a PG&E, new PG&E line costs. So I'm inclined to not require it.
Consensus on that?
I think so. Sounds like it. Yeah.
I'll keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, page 10 of 20, back to page 65. D10, talking about mapping all these various encumbrances, if you will. I guess I don't feel like we need to map those. I think that's something that the administrator, I guess, can just sort of identify on a case-by-case basis rather than having a map with a million circles. I mean, unless that everyone else feels differently. I mean, I like the map that you attached to at the end that shows some of the various encumbrances or regulations, appeal areas and such. But some of these things, I guess they're just, it's like kind of too small to map, basically.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna get so many that I can't just look and
Right.
research. And I guess, it could be complicated if they change the bus stop route about, I think there's been talk about cutting this.
All right, 11 of 20, next page, TB11, regarding definitions of newly constructed. I would agree with your assessment there. That it basically doesn't apply to JADUs, it just applies to like breaking ground construction.
I guess the question, and maybe it's a question for the building inspector. I haven't seen that as a definition, so I think it's sort of a commonly understood, but I could see where someone could try and argue it. But I think if we all understand what it means.
So still some clarification required there.
Oh, I could say all newly constructed first or newly converted from non-habitable space. And I think that would clarify.
Converted from the non-habitable space part.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so not to nitpick, but a garage would have a specific size entryway, which may not be ADA compliant. And, if you've got a stone or concrete structure, that would be somewhat problematic to comply.
Okay, so not just remodeled space, because the entrance and exits are significant.
I mean, it can be done, but is that what we want? I guess is the question.
That was it. Yeah. Not that we had any great clarity on that last one.
Well, you mean on the construction ADA compliant? We just say on new construction.
Okay.
I will see, I have a question here for if, I will ask what HCD understands that to mean.
Chris?
I be honest with you, tended to focus on the three questions that were presented to the council. Yeah, those were, just want to check in with you folks and see whether you were sort of in agreement with those or not.
I guess, in my opinion, I would disagree with the council on the second question. I think that SDR should be allowed in ADUs, and I would justify that with the fact that we have a cap. See, so if anyone's building an ADU anywhere, it's still an additional housing unit in the city. It's not an additional STR in the city. But yes,
Okay.
I wasn't at the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, there was some concern that
Well, you're thinking about that. I will add, I have some concerns on that one. I don't disagree with you, but I think because it's in the state law that says ADUs won't be STRs, I think that would be a tough one to get by HCD. And so unless, there's a real strong consensus on that, I would say, let's not try and.
Is that just ministerially approved ADUs, or this is any?
Well, that could be a question. So, yes, so I think it's only the ministerially approved. So, I do think that you could allow an option for someone to apply for a use permit, basically an exception. You could do that.
Oh, even given the current, or. Okay, I guess, yeah, so when I read what the city council voted on, it made it sound like that situation, but maybe I think I misread the way this was written, that situation was, if you built an ADU with a use permit.
Oh, and actually, I'm sorry, maybe it was confusing because my reference should have been
I guess what they voted on is, can you apply for a use permit to use an ADU as an STR? But I guess what I was thinking was, can you apply for a use permit to build an ADU to be used as an STR?
Yes, well, that's what you'd have, so just like, the ministerial approvals, I think I should have been referencing the answer to number 2 as instead of number 1, based on the answer to number. Oh, yes, with or without a use permit. They really didn't specifically vote on that. So the ministerial approvals only apply to, up to 800 square feet, whatever those sizes are, heights. If you want something bigger, you can apply for a use permit to have something that exceeds those that envelope that HCD has set up for these ministerial approvals. So to me, it seems like allowing it to be an STR would be outside that envelope, and that you should be able to apply for a regular permit to have it. You just don't get the ministerial approval.
I don't get the sense that was the intent of the city council's vote.
I don't think so. I don't think so either, but I'm just telling you, I think you have that.
I see, okay.
That makes sense to me, and I think that's a reasonable.
And I'm not sure, I think the council's answer was no. but they didn't really get into the nuance of it.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm thinking, yeah. So, Ermi, do we have a recommendation then?
I mean, I still sort of fundamentally disagree with their vote to, on item number 1. I've sort of been schooled tonight, so I'm proposing hypotheticals, but someone could theoretically build like a 25-foot tall, or I guess 18 if we're negotiating the height, ADU, just for the sake of having additional improvements on the property, then move it to it. The primary is it? Like, I mean, I understand the benefits of ADUs and I understand the benefits of STRs, but I also understand that ADUs have the character of to a limited extent, I guess. So just trying to figure it out.
Well, they could ministerially have a STR that is in that home. So with the height, the size. Yes, move into that.
So they can sort of like strategically with the primary residence as an STR. Some additional improvements that we thought. But into it.
Actually,
That doesn't seem that much different to me than from just.
I agree with that.
yep.
It's a workaround for sure.
Well, and then you always have to consider the cap.
Well, and that's what I think is somewhat unique about Trinidad in, and I think, the economics of it is sort of difficult. I'm sure it's case by case for individuals, but I think as Tristan has pointed out, that situation of being able to have an STR could make it more affordable for someone to buy a property in Trinidad and build a house.
Like my response to that argument last time was that, that also becomes an asset on the property that increases the potential sales price of the house and so on and so forth.
So it's not necessarily
It's not to get,
Yeah.
create real affordable housing necessarily.
right. Nor does it really create additional housing units. If you, and this was the comment I was going to make earlier, right? There was some concern that the ADU ordinance and the STR ordinance should stand on their own merits, right? Be sort of entity. You should rely on the cap as you get drafted in the ADU. It's a really concern that I share, but it was a concern that was.
Yeah, that's fair.
So what do we?
I don't, the only one I really have a strong recommendation on is that full-time STR should not be allowed in an ADU without approval of use.
Without what?
Without approval of use. So not ministerial ADUs, they can't be STRs. That's the only thing I'm clear on from the state law. I think that the Coastal Commission at their December meeting, I can send you the link. Actually, I didn't get a chance to finish watching it. But they had a presentation and discussion on STRs and housing and affordability and ADUs. And the parts that I did watch, there is I think when we adopted our ADU ordinance or STR ordinance, there really wasn't studies or evidence showing one way or another how STRs affected property values, for example, occupancy. And I think in Trinidad, there's some things that make logical sense as how they would affect Trinidad, but I also think that Trinidad's demographics had actually showed the opposite in some ways. But now they have some more studies. Now, again, these are bigger cities and not, everything's, economic drivers of housing prices in Trinidad are very different than in many places. And you're just not ever going to get real affordable housing, regardless of what you do. But, I think the Coastal Commission is probably going to want to see more limits on STRs and ADUs than that. It's my impression. Which goes beyond the state.
And in that vein, I'm sort of thinking that like there's, surprise, like a significant difference between like San Diego or Manhattan Beach and Trinidad. Right? Like I acknowledge that, you know, building a 25 ADU just for the sake of renting a house in STR probably doesn't fundamentally change the character of Manhattan Beach too much. But here, yes, absolutely. He also said that there's some, not all was it Coastal Commission staff are sort of in agreement about the extent to which these things should be reined in or not.
Yeah, and again, that was before the December meeting. They didn't necessarily give me additional guidance after this December meeting. They suggested I watch it. But I think it's really, they did recently certify the Humboldt County's ADU ordinance, and I think they mentioned like Mike Wilson, he specifically said that primary unit not be allowed to be an STR, and that ended up in the ordinance. As an example. But staff, but that's just one commissioner, and they went along with it, and I think Humboldt County was fine with it. I think actually Mike Wilson suggested that before it got to hearing, and Humboldt County said it might be different if Trinidad pushed back and said, no, don't agree with that because, and have a reason for it. I think the cap is primary. And so I see, you know, both sides on this one. And I don't have a strong recommendation one way or the other.
Well, what then is what then is our action that we want to take? Do we want to make other recommendations to the city council for these three issues? Or do we want to see how Coastal Commission and Housing Authority?
Well, that's what I think. If you guys have a strong consensus here, then that's what we present to HCD and see what they say.
I'm not sure that we have a strong consensus yet.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. Yeah,
right.
I guess I could just pose the question to HCD and see how they would interpret these questions.
I think asking a specific question to them probably
Yeah.
would be the most direct way to get an
Yeah. Okay.
ordinance together.
But as HCD and the Coastal Commission do all simultaneously, right? So that's.
Well, I think. Yes.
It wouldn't necessarily be in concert with one another in terms of.
Well, I think HCD is going to stick to the letter of the law. Coastal Commission goes beyond and does their own. I mean, the Coastal Act has broader applications, and there's more ability for interpretation in Coastal Act and regulation. So it's not just that they do their own thing. They have a broader scope and they have more leeway to interpret things. And I think this is an issue that is somewhat in flux. And so we can't necessarily even predict exactly what the commission's going to do. And that's where Coastal Commission staff was sort of like, they didn't have a strong recommendation either, except to follow HCD's, the letter of that state law.
Any further comments?
I mean, just so that you folks can make informed decisions, I'll say that I'm no across the board on 1 through 3. Yeah, do with that what you may.
Well, at least we could, yeah, I see what you're saying.
At your discretion.
Yeah. Well, I think the the recommendation was is to ask the
I
housing.
can put these scenarios to HCD and see if they raise red flags for them. That's sort of the first hurdle. And then it would be,
And we still have to hear back from both organizations before we can really put the final seal of approval on this anyway. So,
at least, but I think you want to get it pretty close to what you want before we give it to them, because we don't want to make a bunch of changes after. But yeah, approval will come after there.
Other energy questions for us?
Like I said, just, if you have any, I will pose these scenarios to HCD and see, is this acceptable? Is this, and just get that answer back. And that will help inform your next discussion. And so yeah, as long as you don't see any red flags anywhere here, we're ready, button up a couple of things with Coastal Commission and then send it off to HCD.
any last minute comments before I ask for public comment? All right, this is the opportunity for anyone from the public to comment on the ADU agenda item. We have no public here in town hall, but I do see some people on Zoom. So is there any public comment? Again, I would ask that you identify yourself and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. All right, I don't see any hands raised, so I'll bring it back for any last minute questions, comments from the commissioners. All right, hearing none, and this was just for a review and, as I recall, right?
Yeah. No action.
Discussion regarding draft, right? No action needs to be taken. Okay, next item on our agenda is commissioner reports. Any of the commissioners would like to report?
The council disbanded the short-term rental committee, which I was serving on, and so now I'm just floating around with tons of spare time, and if there's something the planning commission needs me to do, I'm at your disposal. But seriously, I'm just checking.
You want to work on the website?
Somebody better. I'll just mention that the next public meeting for the Trinidad Community Coastal Resilience Planning Project is March 7th. And March 7th, 6 p.m. And that is not going to be a Zoom meeting, I understand. Is that correct?
I would guess it'd be hybrid.
Okay, it's interesting the way the flyer reads. It's in-person meeting. Okay, well, it's just
flyer out. I knew the meeting, they picked a date, but I haven't.
Banner on the.
Okay.
Mike, have you information?
I will clarify. And the draft document is not out for public yet, is the Coastal Resilience Action Plan. And I love acronyms, and so I just realized what that acronym is, and I have a lot of fun with that. I think it should be the ocean coastal.
staff report. Anything you'd like to report? Other than on the CRAP?
No, just continuing to work on probably the same stuff I mentioned at the last meeting. I have restarted a conversation about the website, so And I am sort of collecting a list of what needs to be done. So I think Jennifer is learning how to program, change and add stuff on the website. And so I'm going to start working with her and Gabe on let's make some changes. So if anybody has any suggestions, I can start compiling those because I sort of assumed, oh, we'll get it live and then we'll continue to work on it. No one has worked on it and it's terrible. I can't find anything. So I'm working on that. Looks like we might have a full agenda in March because we've got Tristan's project plus the trails.
I'll just mention one thing. I'm sorry, anything else on staff report?
Nothing new.
Okay, any comments on future action items?
I have one that I'm somewhat reluctant to, which is that in the, I guess it's now 3 or 4 experiences I've had with design review, we've always come across that 2,000 square foot guideline. And now officially in 100% of those, we've missed that. Admittedly, it's just a guideline, that's rationale for it and potential implications of it, I think deserve like real consideration, something that we actually have to support or not as we go.
Okay.
Were you here when we were still talking about the design criteria?
I don't think so.
Were you okay?
I think you're pointing at Chris, right?
Yeah, sorry, you.
Seems familiar. It's been quite a year, but
Okay. I will, so we did sort of run through some new design criteria for the LCP update.
I think you're right.
And hopefully that will clarify, but let me send that to you and see if that answers.
That's probably why I keep feeling like I'm beating a dead horse, because every time it comes up, I'm just like, what the hell is it? Just routinely ignore it every time it appears before us.
Oh, yeah. So, well, not every time, I guess, not with the lighthouse. Whose project was that we did?
The Vanderpool?
The Vanderpool project.
But it was something that was mentioned, right?
I mean, that wasn't necessarily the limiting factor, but that was a
No, there were others.
project.
There have been some. I mean, I think there have been some projects where size was an issue, and definitely. But I think it also, you tend to get people who, that wasn't always the case, but I think you get more of like a better design so that they can make those arguments about, well, it's not just a 2,000 square foot box or whatever. And so I think that's been the approach, and to, lower the profile so it's not affecting views. And then you look at, I think everybody pushes that 25%.
Well, let me retract my suggestion that we revisit it in the future, because it seems that we have recently.
But it's a valid observation, and
it was actually honestly kind of struck by the fact that you notice the type of that it applied to the as well. This permits a situation where 3% square foot losses area is pretty discrepancy there between those guidelines in that particular situation.
And I will say, I think it was before my time, but I think around the late 90s, even early 2000, there was a planning commission who really pretty strictly held to that 2,000 square foot. So there's been somewhat different interpretations. But then you also, that was the era where you probably have Jim Cuthbertson's old house off the south side of Edwards. And it's basically a 2,000 square foot box on top of a 2,000 square foot box garage. So it's a 4,000 square foot box. Now they held him to 2,000 square feet, Was that a good design? That's my favorite house.
Might be why I live in a 1970 square foot box.
Any further comments on it? Okay, I'll just mention one thing, and I don't know whether it really requires a future agenda item, but I do know that there's an effort between the museum, the library, and the land trust to put some signage up at Saunders Park for some of the transient issues that have occurred up there. And I know they're working with the city to fund the signs and also working with Gene Bass, who's Pacific Security, on what ordinances or what regulations need to be on those signs. And I don't know what, what I'm getting at is I don't know what the size is. You know, that they should at least be aware of what some of the rules are. And would that come to us, or?
Probably not. I guess I'd have to sort of see the size and specifics, but I think public safety and directional signs are normally not subject to design review. And then also if they're not intended to be visible from off-site. So I mean, it might be at the driveway entrance, but if it's something that's, you know, on the site in the parking lot, that's not going to be design review.
I will make them aware that maybe they should just run the design past you. Okay. Great.
One last thing that occurs to me, should the planning commission have sort of like an envoy to the ongoing Rancheria project? Should it be some, I guess there probably are like government committees that exist for that sort of thing, but I guess if somebody who's abreast of what their intents are, maybe they would permit that, maybe they wouldn't.
Well, let's see. Seems like some of their meetings have been open to the public. So like there's
one list.
like a task force or something.
Well, there was a meeting last night.
That was a public presentation, but they have like a task force that like Elaine Weinreb, and there's some other West Haven folks have attended. So it seems to be open to the public. And then there's been more some staff level meetings where like Eli and myself and Josh Wolf at GHD was there. But I will look into the task force and see if there's.
Yeah, I mean, lobbying hard when this becomes an agenda item. I'm just really curious whether there should be a commissioner who's constantly abreast of whatever it is they're planning, because it's going to affect. That's quite a bit.
Yeah, I think but the way that Rancheria likes to work with the city is on a government to government level. And I would think that, as I understand it now, there are only allowed to be 2 council members at the government to government meetings to prevent having to comply with Brown Act.
Well, that's a different 2 each time too, because if it's the same 2, then it's a standing committee and they are still subject to it.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that it gets complicated.
Yeah.
And
Well, so I think at this point well, like I said, staff has been involved in some staff level meetings. So professional staff. I don't know how much council's been involved. But like I said, there is also this task force that does seem to have some members of the public involved. So I will look into whether that might be an avenue. That'd be good to have.
yeah, there's going to be a lot that's going on, you know, based on their development plan. So worthwhile to just see what we need to be involved in.
Yeah, I know. I've been getting inquiries about, you know, they're doing, you know, a lot of the background reports and mapping and biological cert, you know, that kind of stuff right now. So I've got some questions. A small part.
Well, yeah, and sorry not to cut you off. It might be worthwhile to request or ask the city council if they want the planning commission to do a little bit more than normal review of the draft EIR, which will be, well, the knob's out now. Notice of publication, preparation, excuse me.
Yeah,
Notice of preparation.
Yeah, but I bet it'll be a year.
Well,
It depends on how they're fast tracking it.
yeah, they're trying for like 8 months, I think.
Okay.
So we've got a planning commission who's aggressive in building this plan.
Okay, anything else before we adjourn? Thank you very much, everyone.